We have introduced something new in our weekend services. It's called a Worldview segment. For those of you, this may be your very first time. This is where we want God's people to be informed so they can pray, so they can be empowered to act. So we address moral, cultural, social, and political issues from a biblical worldview, so we can be informed to pray, empowered to act. Now, I want to talk just for a few moments on environmental fanaticism and the Great Green Delusion. Something started about 200 years ago with a social scientist by the name of Thomas Malthus, and he was an apocalyptic scientist. He had been pushing the concept that there are unlimited human needs and limited resources. This started 200 years ago, matter of fact. Unlimited human needs, because the population is growing, and yet on planet Earth there are limited resources. Basically, it has this outlook on life. All of the resources in the world are like a pie, and there are only so many pieces in the pie, and we're down to the last few scraps that we're going to be fighting over as human beings. That's basically, in a nutshell, the extreme interpretation of what started 200 years ago. It's kind of a gloom and doom, end of the world, fear-mongering about the environment and so-called dwindling natural resources, which, by the way, has been marginalized by wave after wave of cutting-edge technological innovation that's actually culminated in what many are calling the golden age of mass production. So here's what you need to know in order to evaluate environmentalism as a political view. Is more like a religion, a false religion, a faith-based religion that's built on fear. And fear does work. It's been proven throughout the centuries. The Green New Deal isn't about the environment, it's about control through taxation. Now, we know that inflation is at an all-time high in the United States of America. Nothing highlights it more than the price of gasoline, diesel fuel, oil, and natural gas. They're up 100 to 200% and still rising since 2021. And this most recently, the Democratic-controlled Senate recently passed a $750 billion, $250 billion healthcare tax and climate bill. $370 billion slated for progressive green initiatives. $80 billion to bolster staff and technology at the Internal Revenue Service, about 87,000 new IRS armed agents. Now, as Christians, we are required by God to be responsible stewards of God's creation. Responsible conservationism, which is the protection of the resources that our Creator has entrusted to us on His planet called Earth, which Jesus said was God's footstool. So there's what's called in the Old Testament the Genesis mandate that every Jew, every Orthodox Jew followed, every Christian today follows. What is the Genesis mandate? God said in Genesis to Adam and Eve, He said, be fruitful, multiply, replenish the earth. Be fruitful, multiply, replenish the earth. Don't deplete the earth, but don't worship the earth. But we are to be good stewards of God's resources. And God has entrusted enough resources as long as humans are breathing air on planet Earth. Now, much of environmentalism data is today being weaponized and politicized by climate justice warriors. Now, friend, life requires both faith and science. Yes, you heard me right. Life requires both faith and science to understand ourselves and our relationship with our Creator and His creation. The psalmist said in Psalm 19, the heavens declare the glory of God. So true science doesn't eliminate God, it illuminates God. A prominent Jewish scholar once said, science takes things apart to see how they work. Faith puts things together to see what they mean. In order to have meaning in life, you have to have a source of faith in the one true Creator of all things, God Himself. Einstein, who wrote in Science and Religion, published in 1954, he said this, science without religion is lame, religion without science is blind. We as Christians do not deny true science, because anything that is true, if it is true, verifiably true, it is traced all the way back to God, who is ultimate truth. But there are some tactics that are being used by mass media and world leaders to create artificial crises in an attempt to frighten and force people into what many are calling the Great Green Delusion. But get this, the good news is the general public is getting smarter and are beginning to separate fact from fiction with the access to unbiased data that is being discovered. So, how does this relate to us as Christ followers? 4 thoughts. God's word dictates the following. Number 1, understand God is sovereign. He is sovereign over all creation. God is the creator of all living things, and God is in charge ultimately of every square inch of planet Earth. You can rest assured in that. And if something goes beyond God's natural laws or limits, he will intervene, as in Genesis 11, the Tower of Babel. Number 2, the world will not end because of climate change. It just will not. Number 3, the great climate upheavals mentioned in the book of Revelation will be divine acts of God's judgment on mankind, which is why the Apostle Paul said in Romans chapter 8, he used a very unusual phrase. He said, the earth groans, the earth moans, the earth is experiencing birth pains even now for this purpose, the manifestation of the sons of God. The earth knows that and every living thing knows that it's living under a curse of sin, and the earth cannot wait till Christ returns and the curse is lifted and Jesus begins to rule all of creation again.